I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The cafe was half empty on that slow Tuesday morning. The usual rhythm of espresso shots, soft indie music barely audible over the hum of the espresso machine. I sat at the corner table, a little too early for the lunch crowd, scrolling through my phone without really looking at anything. My usual, black coffee, no sugar. The barista, a woman in her mid-40s with tired eyes but a kind smile, brought it over without a word. "Hey, Kyle," she said quietly, setting down the cup. Her voice was soft, like she was sharing something meant only for me, even though she barely knew me. I blinked up at her, surprised. "You remembered?" She shrugged, folding the napkin she had just used to wipe down the counter. "You come here every day at the same time. Thought it'd be weird not to." Her hands were still resting on the counter, fingers tracing invisible patterns. I caught myself staring a little too long. The way the light hit the slight creases on her skin, the faint tremble in her fingers like she was holding something back. I said nothing. Instead, I nodded and took a sip of the coffee, the bitterness grounding me. It wasn't like I expected more than this. A nod, a smile, maybe a good morning. But somehow, the way she said my name, low, deliberate, stirred something I didn't want to admit was there. The cafe was a quiet place for me. Somewhere between the caffeine and the familiar routine, I could forget the unsent texts I kept drafting in my head. Texts I never sent because I wasn't sure who I was trying to reach or why I felt so empty typing them out. I glanced out the window, watching the rain start to blur the edges of the streetlights. She pulled out a chair and sat down across from me before I could stop her. "I shouldn't," she said, voice barely above the sound of the rain tapping the glass. I didn't ask why. Instead, I reached for the chair she'd pushed closer. She looked away, eyes fixed on the steaming mug in her hands. "We can't be alone together," she said finally, and the words felt like a warning or maybe a plea. I blinked, caught off guard. "Then why did you ask me in?" Her eyes flicked up, meeting mine just for a second before she looked back down. The silence stretched between us, heavy, awkward, and full of everything we didn't say. Her fingers tightened around the mug. The steam curled up like a fragile secret. Outside, the rain was letting up. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I folded the napkin on the table twice and looked at the small, cracked pattern where the light caught it. The clock on the wall ticked loud in the quiet room. When she finally stood up to leave, she hesitated at the door, turning back with a soft, almost shy smile. "I'll see you tomorrow, Kyle." Her voice was a promise and a question all at once. I stayed there, the cup cooling in my hand, the empty chair across from me suddenly feeling like the only place I wanted to be. And then, my phone buzzed with a message I wasn't expecting, her name flashing on the screen. "Can we talk?" I didn't know if I was ready, but I knew I had to answer. She stiffened when my phone buzzed again. The screen lit up with a message from her daughter. I glanced at her, caught in that brief freeze, the way her jaw tightened like she was holding back a storm. We didn't speak. The kettle whistled, but neither of us moved to turn it off. Later, in the hallway, I heard laughter, my friend Mark coming up the stairs. His footsteps were uneven, like he was carrying more than just a bag. "Hey," he said, pausing when he saw her sitting on the steps with me. His eyes flicked between us, sharp but not accusatory. "Everything okay?" She smiled, too quick, too forced. I shifted, hands stuffed in my pockets, suddenly aware of the space between us. Back inside, the quiet settled like a weight. She looked at me, eyes soft but distant. "I don't want to mess things up," she whispered, voice barely steady. I nodded, but my heart raced. Our hands brushed, once, twice, until they almost found the rest. I leaned in, but then the door creaked. And just like that, the moment slipped away. We sat on the bench outside the apartment building, the sky bruised with early dusk. The streetlights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows between us. She was quiet, her hands folded tightly in her lap, like she was holding herself together. I watched the way her eyes kept drifting toward the road, as if waiting for something or someone. "I saw you with her today," I said softly, voice almost breaking the silence. She didn't look at me. "Mark," I nodded. Yeah. He said something. I don't know. A sigh escaped her lips. It's complicated. I reached out but stopped myself halfway, hovering in that space where reaching felt like crossing a line. You don't have to explain. Her eyes finally met mine, raw, a little wild. You don't know what it's like, she whispered. To want something so badly, but know it's wrong. To feel like you're drowning and still keep pretending you can swim. Her voice cracked, but she held it together. I swallowed hard, the weight of it settling in my chest. Why do you keep letting me in? She didn't answer right away, just blinked, the silence stretching between us like the space before a storm breaks. And then, almost too quiet to hear, she asked, what happens if I say I'm scared of losing you? She stopped answering my texts first, not outright ignoring, just slow replies, clipped words, the kind that made me read too much into every little pause. Then one afternoon, the door to her apartment stayed shut when I knocked, the lock clicking softly from the other side. I waited, longer than I should have, before turning away. Later, I saw her from across the street, walking fast with a man I didn't recognize, his hand resting easy on her back. I wanted to call her, to ask what I hadn't dared before, about the man, about the nights she wasn't there, about the cracks beneath the quiet smiles. But the message stayed unsent, the words lost somewhere between hope and hesitation. I sat on that same bench, the one where we almost spoke too much, and watched people pass by like a story I couldn't finish. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The hallway was narrow, the evening light slanting in through the window. I stood just outside her door, the sound of her key turning echoing softly in the quiet. She opened the door, eyes tired but steady. No words at first, just a look that held everything we hadn't said. I wasn't sure you'd come, she said, voice low. I wasn't sure I should. We stood there, neither moving forward, both caught between what we wanted and what we feared losing. She stepped aside, and I slipped in. The apartment felt smaller than before, every shadow sharper. I don't want to make it harder, she said, pouring 2 cups of tea. I nodded, watching the steam rise, the way her hands trembled just a little. I don't want to lose you, I said, the words more honest than I'd intended. She didn't answer right away, just reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Okay, she whispered. That one word, soft, simple, carried everything we'd been too afraid to say. And for a moment, that was enough. Months had passed, not marked by grand gestures, but by quiet mornings. I still came to the cafe at 8:47 a.m., the same time, ordering the usual black coffee. She'd be there too, sometimes before me, already holding her chipped mug of jasmine tea. We never spoke about what could have been or what almost happened. Instead, there was comfort in the routine, the way her eyes would catch mine for a brief second, the subtle brush of hands when passing the sugar. Some days, we'd sit on that old bench outside, the one where silence once stretched between us like a storm. Now, it felt like a shared pause, a place where no words were needed. Life hadn't smoothed out all the edges. There were still small hesitations, quiet fears. But those moments felt softer now, worn down by time and the weight of what we'd dared to risk. One afternoon, as the light slipped low, she caught my gaze and smiled. Not the smile of new love, but something steadier, deeper. I folded the napkin on the table, twice, just like the first time, and thought, maybe this is what it means to be seen. Not perfectly, not loudly, just fully. And that, I realized, was enough.